A very warm welcome to our esteemed colleagues and friends. On behalf of Berkshire Hathaway HomeServices, California Properties New Homes Division, we're thrilled to have you with us out here for a very special New Homes Division event. I'm Marcus Cantor.
And I'm Christy St. James, and we're the founding directors of the New Homes Division. Considering the New Homes Division mission is to serve as a preeminent resource for California's real estate development community, we are proud of the division's steady growth and the company's leadership and agents who make this possible.
A key part of this mission is our commitment to celebrate and curate awareness about leading contributors to the history and future of development in California. Award-winning Zoltan Pali, our guest today, is certainly among this group of leaders we are inspired by, as having made an instrumental impact in real estate development, particularly in the area of architectural design. To that end, we're grateful and ecstatic to have Zoltan here and hope that you will find our discussion as invigorating as we know it will be.
For the format of today's event, we will provide additional background on Mr. Pali and then lead into a Q&A discussion where Marcus and I will offer some prepared questions that covers topics such as his career, design philosophy, and on incorporating an impact mindset in our work. We will then transition into Q&A with all the members on Zoom. We invite you to enter your questions in the Zoom chat and we will relay them to Mr. Pali. The event will close roughly at 4 p.m.
Zoltan Pali, architect, is the founder and design principal of SPF Architects, an award-winning studio that has been recognized with over 100 national and regional accolades. Zoltan's practice is anchored in a rigorous, pragmatic, holistic philosophy. His studio aims to uncover truths, pursue the unexplored, and challenge conventions in architectural and urban organization. Their goal is to make things perform better, look better, and awaken their environment. In 2005, Zoltan was inducted into the American Institute of Architects College of Fellows. Now let's turn our attention to Zoltan. It's a pleasure to have you with us today.
Thank you. Glad to be here.
So, our first topic really is, what led you to choose architectural design as your life path, and who were your mentors and influences?
Well, nothing, this is interesting. Nothing really actually led me to choose architecture. As far as I can always remember, it's the only thing I wanted to do. So there wasn't even a pivotal moment of thinking, well, that's what I'm going to do. It just seemed like that just what it was. As early as I can remember from childhood, that somehow was something that I was was going to do, even though I did, as a young person, as a young child, you don't know what architecture really is. You don't actually know what you have to do. You kind of only imagine, what that entails. What was, I think, instrumental in that, of course, is my dad, who's an immigrant to this country, was an engineer, a mechanical engineer, and the type of mechanical engineer that worked on buildings, not the type of mechanical engineer that worked on engines or the other side of mechanical engineering. Even though he was trained in both, of course, but he ended up working in the sort of real estate portion of it, of course, right? Designing mechanical systems for residential and office buildings and so on and so forth. And so I saw him work, and I think especially in those days when engineers and architects kind of worked similarly. We all worked at a drafting table, that was the old, so I saw my dad drafting, and I was fascinated by the drafting, by the actual drawing aspect of it, and then understanding that this particular drawing actually is something you build from. So that was what was very interesting to me. Of course, of course the blueprint, of course but the fact that you took a piece of paper, it was blank, and drew something on it. And somehow somebody built it. It was pretty astounding to me, actually.
Excellent. Was there any particular, architects along the way that were your mentors or that maybe influenced your early style?
Well, that is an extremely complex and long question. Yes and no, and no and yes. I mean, it was, I don't ever really recall thinking about style per se, even as a young person, although, I was very, my parents were very conservative, but they liked in architecture, and what they liked in music, and what they liked were very classical things.
Got it.
So I grew up with, well, first of all, they were from Europe, so everything was, like from Budapest, which is one of the most beautiful classic cities in the world. In the world. So to them, that was architecture. And they were here in the 60s, 50s and the 60s when they came out. So it was a completely different place for them, obviously. So they were really much holding on to that, right? And of course, music and everything else that was in the house was all from the classics. And my mother both of them were avid classic music listeners. And my mother, when she was young, she was in the ballet. So there was all that so everything was very traditional at home. So it's an interesting thing. So does that influence me? I don't know. Certainly, I know that when I was very young, we went back to Europe for about a year. And when my parents actually obtained amnesty from the Hungarian government and they became American citizens, and we were able to travel. So as a young boy, I was able to go back, and so I saw old cities, Vienna, and Paris, and so.
So it had an impact.
It had an impact. I mean, certainly I was 6 years old, and I was, going up the Eiffel Tower. It's pretty amazing.
It's incredible. Well, what I can say about my personal experiences, I was introduced to your Oshry residence in 2003.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing this home. So, we asked about, influences. When I saw this home, it was like, wow. Like, I knew right away, I didn't know who did it, who the architect was. I just knew this house had a unique expression and philosophy in what it was. And so, my question would be, between that home, which was completed in 2003, and let's say like your Orem residence completed in 2018, what would you say were the key insights that were important that helped elevate your work?
Well, it's an interesting question, because I see a thread from that Oshry house that you mentioned, and then of course the ones very recent, the Orem residence. There's an absolute thread through it all, right? So I don't know, I don't necessarily understand the word elevate, but, and because I see it as kind of a straight line in a way. I don't see this as something, maybe the,
Well, what did you learn new along a
Well,
decade and a half ago, right?
Right,
So what takes you from one place to keep growing as an artist and as an architect?
Yeah, that really is I always go back to the basics and always try and basically improve on them. And of course, the basics are a great floor plan, a great plan, all about light and all about a nice flow within the building, any building I work on. So it's really always about that and perfecting that. There are no, if you look at the work, I don't see giant leaps and bounds and changes. It's all very iterative, very, it's an evolution. But if you look at the two, they're like, the thread is there, the underlying philosophical thread is there in all the work. Yeah.
Well, it's interesting because you brought up philosophy, which is definitely one of our topics today. You clearly, our experience, and this is from conversations with other agents, other architects, our experience of your work is that there's clearly a design philosophy in what you do. I think actually Christy has a question that she wanted to ask you about that.
Okay.
Well, yes, and it's very interesting because you've been quoted as identifying yourself with a holistic architecture, which we understand embraces a humanistic approach that integrates the mind, the body, and the soul. And can you please share with us your philosophy on that topic?
It's an interesting thing because what you described is more of a way of living and a way of, maybe even treating someone who's sick. or it's more of a medical thing, right? And I saw the word holistic when I probably used that. I probably didn't intend it in those terms. Mm-hmm. I saw it because I see buildings as a series of systems, right? And the systems are just everything, right? The systems are the laws, the rules. The systems are the clients, the system, or then the structural system, and the mechanical system. And it's all, basically a building is a series of all these systems that come together to create a whole. So I was thinking about it in the terms of a whole, when you take all that information and you try to create a design that tries to solve, not really solving the problems, but tries to utilize all that information to create a holistic architecture which responds to all those issues. That's the environment. That's everything around you. So so the word holistic in that case is a completely different way of looking. It is because the actual definition of holistic is these systems that come together to create the whole. That's the human body too, on a medical perspective. If you live your life that way, and a doctor that treats you that way, he's looking at your whole systems, all your heart, your brain, your thing, and he's treating you as a whole thing.
Yeah.
So that's how I was intending it to mean.
Question. Yeah, I got it.
Okay.
Yeah. There's a lot of the experience of your work there's a lot of, it's a process.
Yeah.
And there's a lot of thought in that process, but my gut tells me that you design for people, the experience of people.
Sure.
And that's what makes, our experience of your work so powerful.
Yeah, well, yeah, okay, go ahead, sorry.
That's kind of the question.
Okay, it's another question. Well,
That's so.
I just, well, it is.
What are you trying for?
Yeah, no, I actually, this is a strange way of putting it up probably, but I'll try and get it out in a cohesive way. But I actually, for the lack of a better term, at least momentarily, I fall in love with my clients.
Yeah.
I fall in love with, even if it's a board of directors or a board, I fall in love with what they're trying to achieve. I mean, I'll fall in love with everybody on the board, but I try, and what that means is I really try and internalize what they need and what they're trying to achieve. Similarly with a client who's trying to build a home, that's what I try and tap into that sort of. It's not really an emotion, but it is kind of an emotion, but it is sort of also at the same time trying to tap into that intellect, if you will, at the same time. And that's why I think when you look at, yes, there's a thread through the work, but each one is different. Because each project is different because I'm responding to the different people that I'm working for.
Yeah.
And responding to the different issues and surroundings that are going to inform the design. That's what I mean by holistic.
Yeah. It feels like the experience is like you're telling a story in your work. Is there, are you?
Of course. That's a very, very, there is a bit of that, for sure, absolutely. I think that certainly in some of the other work that's a little more, it's more of a civic project. Absolutely, there's a story being told. But even in a residential project, for sure, especially if the client is very much vested in the project and the project is for them. It's not necessarily a spec home or something, which I've done those as well,
Yes.
of course. But when it's so, yes, then it's really it is kind of telling a story of this particular family or this particular person's moment in life at that time, right? And I always also think that that's sort of like also trying to say, hey, this piece of architecture is really, yes, it is a moment in time, but hopefully it's also talking a little bit about your past and hopefully about your future. And you just kind of got one foot in each, right? Yeah. You got your foot in the past, you got your foot in the future, and there's a fence. You're straddling a fence. That's the present.
Yeah. As an architect or anybody who's transforming the world that we're living in to the future, that word is, I think, so important. How do you as an architect address creating contemporary architecture now that fits our lives while remaining relevant into the future?
I think that's the one that, when you get up every day and you look in the mirror, that's the question you ask yourself, obviously. How to do that and whether you even need to do that. I think many folks, many people think that they need to constantly reinvent the wheel every Monday morning and come in and do a new architecture. I don't see that as the necessity. I think that it's better to understand the core tenets of what you're trying to achieve and what's important about architecture, and try and always utilize those and stay. Every time I veer off those core tenets, try to do something, I always have to come back to them and go, well, because that's what's going to last. That's what will be timeless, right? How light comes into a space, it's timeless. Doesn't matter whether there's an arch or whether there's a pyramid or whatever. It's that's what's timeless about a piece of architecture, right? How the sun works, how the light works with it, how it feels when you're in it, the shape and the sort of form. It's kind of irrelevant. So true.
Very true. Switching gears a little bit, with inflation and building costs on the rise, what inexpensive materials do you think can be utilized to build elegant projects in the future?
Well, materiality is always this discussion of in every project, of course, how do we save costs and cut costs by coming up finding a material that's interesting and cheap. Or maybe inexpensive, maybe is that a word? Keep in mind that cheap things fall apart and they don't last, okay? So not always, concrete block, great material, lasts you forever. So it's not always the case, but the thing about keeping costs down, it is a bit of understanding and trying to find materials that are, that one will stand the test of time, but hopefully aren't too expensive if that's the mission of the project. The biggest thing I think that one can do as an architect and is really understand that the drivers of costs in construction are not necessarily material costs. And so what drives the cost of construction is labor. It's time, it's people's time. So if you can figure out how to detail something or how to make something come together and look good, that doesn't take 15 hours to do, it only takes 5 hours to do. That's the actual element that goes into the building will cost you a third less because it's time that's costing you. So if you can be clever about that, somehow that maybe is a better way to go than trying to find the next sort of new sort of cheap whatever fake stone or something, because in the end it's going to be really about that. So of course, are we always on the lookout? We're always on the lookout for new materials, of course, and hopefully they've been thought about and designed in a way as a product that can be installed with effectiveness.
Are you using any particular materials now that would fall into that trend?
Well, again, I'm always, I'm always very wary of that. I like to stick with the tried and true in that.
Things that last.
Things that last, right?
Got it.
Things that I love to work with now that are more on the cost effective side, of course, are metals, and light metals and sort of very, the sort of industrial metals like the corrugated metals and the rib metals and so forth on projects where they're required. I get a tremendous amount of square footage very cost effectively, and they are relatively easy to install. Even though that's still, to do it well, to make sure that looks good and that lasts and it doesn't just come apart at the next sort of high winds, or it doesn't leak, all that stuff. All that stuff still takes effort. I think one of the things that I've come to the conclusion that if you want to build, you should build well. Yes. And if you can't build well, then let's not build. Let's do something else or try and figure out how to build well, even if it is for a project that is where the mission is about cost, where the driver absolutely is about cost. But how do you do that? Because the most unsustainable thing you can do is build a building that'll have to be torn down in the next 30, 40 years. Yeah. And we're seeing that now. We're seeing buildings that were built that they're so, and some of the buildings that were built, you can bulldoze them down in an afternoon.
We can see us do that.
You can't bulldoze one of my houses down in an afternoon. afternoon, I can tell you that.
That's for sure.
I mean,
But
so
if I'm hearing you, really, I think the takeaway is that the major costs are in the labor.
Yeah.
And like, for example, we saw recently at a builders convention up north, that there was a company that is building basically modular, structures that can be stacked, I think 7 stories
Yeah.
tall, and they can build, literally they can build like a prefab structure.
Yeah.
In about 40 minutes, they can build something that costs, I think, $80,000.
Yeah.
And it's like 40 minutes. It's incredible quickly. Are you getting involved in prefab or modulars?
We have started to, and we have worked with systems for some of the multifamily projects and so forth that require us to start thinking about not necessarily prefab building housing, but prefab systems. Whether it's a wood framing system, whether it's a shear wall system, whether it's a structural system like you had mentioned, and I forget the name of it because I think I know the one you're talking about. And again, to basically cut time down in the construction process, because you talk anybody with experience, your general conditions are a huge aspect of the cost. The amount of time that the build team has to be on site is a big number. And if you can start whittling down that, you have a better shot, I think, at making a quality project for less cost.
Yeah. So we're talking a little bit about, the future.
Oh boy.
So
Yeah.
I have a question for you, Zoltan. Recent news covering your residential project on Sienna Way, it suggests that it embodies the design that'll be in vogue forever. How do you deal with creating architectural design today so that it still will be in vogue in the future?
Who used that phrase?
I can tell you, it was probably the developer. It was the developer. We have to remember, the developer, the realtors, the people who are, it's about creating stories, certainly.
Certainly.
But, a lot of us saw that property.
It's timeless.
Sienna is a developer project, it's back home.
It is for sure.
What I can tell you is, if you haven't seen it, it's one of the incredibly well built.
Yeah.
Super well built.
I mean, we've been to a lot of homes, and usually we walk around and, it's like here in the new homes world, you got blue tape, and you go and you put blue tape on all the places before it's finished, you're like, it needs work.
Yeah.
That home, I did seriously walk around and look under the hood, and it was one of the best built homes I've ever seen.
It is astonishing what a good job the general contractor, the subcontractors, and the owner. I mean, they were vigilant. I mean, it takes everyone in that.
Sure.
The builders, the subs, the owner absolutely was vigilant. They were just fantastic. They just didn't take no for an answer. I mean, they just went the distance and really pushed everyone to make what you recognize, obviously. So to answer the question though, I think why that you can use those words or in vogue or whatever, it's again because it does still stick to the basics, right? So there's a very strong structural system, there's a very strong mathematical system that holds the whole house together. Even though the house has a plan now that is a little bit more, how should I say, responding to the site and the contours of the site, but there's still an underlying strong system that holds all the other systems together. The way we were able to get light into the building, it's backed up against a hill, right?
Yes.
And backed up with the property above us, and how to get light into the space. We created those courtyards, and there's a series of courtyards, and which may not have been the most efficient, maybe from a plan standpoint, but had you filled those in, it would be a very, very, oppressive to some degree, I think, in some spots, and if we didn't do that. I think the way we were able to, create some outdoor space there that was on a site that didn't have a lot of flat area. And so those are the things, sort of the basic things. That's why it will, I think, stand the test of time, or hopefully does stand the test of time. That because of those simple ideas, not because
How it uses light.
right, how it uses light, how you flow through the house, if you look at the plan very closely, I start with on every project, a very strong structural system. Even though it's not as recognizable in that house as you see in some of my other projects, but it's there.
Yeah. And the materials are classic materials.
Oh, yeah.
Like
Concrete and stone and wood and wood, yeah.
and metal.
Metal.
There's
So
a-
you put bronze or?
Yeah, I used, on that particular one, we had originally used, the intent was to use a bronze anodized aluminum. In the end, I think we ended up, like I have on another project, but we ended up, I think, taking the aluminum and painting it a color, and a metallic color, almost like a car kind of a finish on it. And so it has a iridescence, a little bit of iridescence to that material, but the client really wanted consistency. And the panels that we were trying to make on the exterior were not very conducive to get them anodized, so painting was a much better solution for that. Yeah.
Got it.
Yeah.
Well, it's stunning. It's really beautiful.
It is.
One of the-
Yeah, it is. Thank you, and it is also because of this.
What's the address on that property?
638 Sienna.
Yeah, you guys should definitely take a look at it. 638 Sienna Way.
I think it was.
You can easily still find it on, it's
It's in
still
the
for sale.
MLS.
That's-
I think it is. Yeah.
Yeah, well, somebody likely is gonna buy that property soon, I'm sure.
Yeah, I mean, it is what's interesting because it has, even though that the sort of the approach to the street is a little bit narrow.
Yeah, right.
Narrow, we try to create some impact with the how the building comes out, jets up towards the street. So I think that, it was one of those projects that, frankly, in the beginning, I thought, well, it's a spec home. I don't particularly think that they often turn out that great, and they did turn out pretty darn good, so.
Everyone apparently was on the same page. They wanted to
Yeah.
build a masterful
Yeah,
home.
so that was nice.
Well, congratulations, because that is an amazing home.
Thank you.
So the two sides of the coin, as an architect, you sometimes get to build extravagant, well, I don't know if that's a good word, beautiful homes that take large amounts of money to build.
Yeah.
And sometimes, you're, instead of building for one person, there's, things currently in Los Angeles and other cities, affordable housing is an issue, sustainable homes are things that, people are having to consider. As an architect, I'm pretty aware that you're, looking at density.
Sure.
What are you doing to approach density in cities today in your work?
Well, density, it's not so much, what drives density is not so much what we do as architects. We respond to those issues, right? Density is driven by, the sort of political and social climate, right? And how zoning laws and municipal codes change and allow, not allows, right, but promote the necessity really for and resolution of creating more and more habitable space because there's a shortage of it, right? And so so as architects, all we're trying to do is we're trying to solve those basic mathematical problems once we're faced with them. hopefully be in some way sometimes even try and suggest even better and more efficient ways of doing that. But I mean, it really is, and then thinking about, I mean, a multifamily project is sort of like this. It's you got to look at the sort of the smallest element in it, right? Because and then you multiply it, right? So the smallest element in it is the unit. So
Right.
how do you make that unit more efficient? How do you make that unit a better place to live with a smaller amount of square footage, so you can have hopefully more of it? So it's really about the planning and the volume of it. What can be created and it still creates a comfortable environment that goes back still to the basics of the light, of the ventilation, of the flow, and all that sort of stuff. Because yes, you can do it, of course. Yeah.
And that's the key. But is that what architecture is? I mean, when you think about it, like anyone could build. But when you consider that if you're in a case of density, you're putting more people together in such a way that you have to consider the structures, the light, and how you mass these together to create an experience.
Yeah.
So I think that's kind of like,
Yeah, that's well, I mean, certainly in a very dense project, that's a huge challenge, right? Because light is a premium in those cases, right? And be getting access to light, especially in a building that's very tall, that may be with a very tall building next to it. How do you access to light is it's a struggle for sure. That's, I think, is the
and privacy and all
right,
that.
yeah, and privacy
together.
Yeah, living together. I mean, yeah, again, I think there's been a nice move towards, society and culture has moved away from being extremely private to being, to seem to be, it fluctuates back and forth. The pandemic kind of didn't help all that business, but we'll come back to our senses hopefully soon, and because that was what was allowing the sort of socialization, was allowing the density even occur, even more denser, which is important, right? Certainly. Right.
I guess, and then certainly through COVID, that became a trend to build density in such a way where there's more outdoor space, more airflow, more wellness, and that reacted into, a lot of spa wellness within luxury homes like Sienna Way, the residence.
Yeah, sure. Everyone is. I think everyone is a tendency. I mean, I don't think there's even what would be now considered a modest-sized home now would be considered modest-sized home. You don't have at least some aspect of that in the home, someplace where you can stay there and you can work out and you can, treat yourself, I suppose.
Yeah, certainly. I think we're going to wrap up with one more question.
I want to ask him too, along those lines, what new trends are you seeing coming to light now in light of the pandemic? I think a lot of things have really changed. Are you seeing people wanting other amenities in their home?
I don't necessarily see it much in the sort of luxury market. They're probably not much difference, right? I mean, those kinds of projects always have sort of all the amenities that someone wants, whether there's a pandemic or not.
We definitely saw more spas.
Yeah.
Coming out. Home gyms.
Home offices.
Well, the home office thing, I think, was the big thing, and I think where it's interesting and more relevant is in the multifamily, where maybe you start to try and create a space where someone can actually work, and I think that there should be, and I've always been a big proponent of this, is that you should be able to zone it in a way where you can have a person live in a unit and be able to run a business out of that unit as well. Zoning doesn't truly allow that, but it should really be incorporated. It should be incorporated into the multifamily. And you should be able to have conference rooms and conference centers in the multifamily. And I'm talking about your basic multifamily project. I'm not talking about, high-end multifamily project, yes, of course. All the amenities. I'm talking about your day-to-day, your average, sort of multifamily project, the everyman project, right? Those things should be there. And I think owners and developers should really promote that. And why? Because if you can do that, and if you can comfortably do that, you can cut down on all the other ills in the city, including traffic and pollution and so on. If you can get folks to be able to function very effectively in that universe, I guess.
Yeah, I think that's a very important statement, by the way. So one more question before we open up questions. So if you're there, get in your chat, ask your questions now. We're going to be turning this over to the members shortly. Last question is, and this could be, one of those questions that you as an architect love.
Okay.
If it could only be one thing, ultimately, what do you desire your impact to be on the industry at large?
Oh, wow.
I told you.
There's two answers to, obviously there's kind of two answers to that question. I mean, almost one answer is nothing. Because,
I appreciate your humbleness.
Yeah, because if you strive to do that, you get your eye off the ball, because if that's your mission, then you're going to get your eye's going to come off the ball. You're going to hit a strike. Frankly, I think. The goal is not to have an impact. The goal is yes, it is by doing good work. And hopefully, you have a good impact on people's lives. But that's the impact. I mean, there's no anything beyond that, frankly. Anything. And so I can't answer that in any sort of yes.
Do you think there's, what do you think from a mindful point of view that we all within the development community could be doing to push the ball forward in the state of California in such a way that we're making a better place for us to live? I think that's what I'm really asking.
Oh, I see.
What's your impact? Well, how do we make it better?
Well, I think I'm going to probably say something that everyone says, because I think it's probably because how do we create or try to create denser civic life and yet at the same time do it in a way that is environmentally responsible, right?
Yeah.
So and that just is a constant struggle and not just struggle because you're having to rethink things all the time, because as you evolve, new things come to light.
Yes.
Well, the other day I'm working on a project that we're putting an array of solar photovoltaic panels on the building. It's a performing arts center. It's great. Then now the topic is up. Well, what happens in 15 years when these photovoltaic panels are useless now? Where do they go? What happens, right? So I got a car that's a battery car, right? What happens when the battery goes? So it's like now so now we got to rethink what happens now. So let's talk about how do you deal with that? So I mean, how do the folks that make that stuff now respond to that, and how do we get them to respond to that? And I think it's not like one big sort of silver bullet thing, right? It's every little thing. It's every little thing you do, right? How do you start thinking about building a building where there's no waste? How do you start thinking about utilizing material
and with creating the limited amount, with the minimum amount of waste, right? And I know it can be done, because I'm sure if you put your mind to it and you start thinking mathematically, you can start minimizing, start
Efficiency.
whittling away at that problem, right?
Yes.
So I think, but maybe you just need to have it promoted somehow. And I don't know what that is. That's more of a political question, I suppose. But how do you get that how do you promote folks who are in the building industry to do that? And because because maybe there's something really, not just, it has to work obviously financially, but it also has an impact that is positive to the community.
We need a mindful coalition.
Yeah, for sure.
Basically, people working together with transformation, being a target, and, as you said, a always changing
Yeah.
target, because it's
always-
interesting that you're saying, yeah, of course, put solar now, and then when that's no longer relevant.
Yeah.
Like right now, it's so relevant.
Yeah, but how do we deal with that? So again, there's everything we do, of course, impacts something
Yeah.
else. Unfortunately, that's the way that you can't predict. Anyway, well, life is nothing but a series of mistakes, right? And just keep trying to get through it.
Hopefully get better. And certainly, you're in your thing every day. So, our collective experience of your work, Zoltan, is that you are getting better. And a lot of people might not know, go to your website and take a look, but I mean, you've been involved in a lot of civic projects.
I've been involved in a few.
More than many.
Not as many as I would like to, but yeah, but I have been, and I love them. There's nothing more satisfying, nothing more gratifying, I think, than going into a project where, you built something and it's meant for a bunch of kids to start swimming and getting physically active, or a basketball place where it's all, kids get there and they play ball and they make their physical bodies better.
Yeah.
Or a theater where you see a performance and you see everyone get together to watch that one thing. It's quite an amazing experience.
It's beautiful.
It is.
That's great.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. We're going to turn to our members. I see we've got a question from Mary. Let's see here. How would you explain your process or best practices or requirements with clients? How do you begin your initial consultation?
How do I begin my initial consultation? With a drink.
That explains it.
It helps.
I'm not joking. No, you have to, how initial consultation, conversation and getting to know the person and getting to know the group. And not necessarily it has to be, I'm being jokeful, I suppose, but it is really sitting down and trying to listen to what folks have to say. And so, and there's a series of questions perhaps that we might end depending on the type of project, for sure. Most of the time now, even on the more larger complex projects, there's always, someone's already done a pretty extensive list of things that they want or that they need. And that's all sort of very nice and factual. Like, I want this, so we need this, we get that. But then the next topic of conversation is well, what's this place going to mean? What do you want it to feel like? All these are some of the more sort of intangible things that you need to explore. You need to listen, because words are important, and how people express themselves and how they express what those needs or desires or issues are is important to hear, and maybe even help define those things in that conversation. So that's, it's not
simple, really. I mean, in a lot of ways, it's like a mini dating session, you know, a couple of you.
I think it's not that different than, you know, what we do as
What we do.
realtors. I mean, you know, sometimes you're dealing with a board of trustees, which I'm sure is very different than dealing with,
Sure
you
enough.
know,
Sure.
how different is that?
Well, you know, it is different. It is in a lot of ways. I mean, I love both of them, actually, interestingly enough, as complicated as dealing with a big group can be, because it can be much more, but it also is, that complexity is very interesting, because that complexity, hopefully, you know, will come through in a holistic resolution to the architecture. Well, that's true, right? I mean, that's it. What you're trying to do is you're trying to, for the lack of a better term, and it maybe maybe it will be misconstrued, but to please the situation, right? You're trying to please the situation, and you can't please everybody, and you can't please everybody in the community, and you can't please every board member. But what you're trying to do is you're trying to create something that really that they resonate with, and that the rest of the community resonates with. So there's no sort of, there isn't a formula for that. You know, there's I can't give you like the steps, because you got to sit down with the people, and that evolves as you're there, you know, in a way, as you're reacting and interacting. So you kind of have to be very flexible and open-minded, and know when to be closed-minded, know when to say, no, that's wrong. You know, I mean, there's you know, when to put up those sort of limitations where because you've been already in so many places that, you know, I've already been through that didn't work there. You know, so you but it's really, yeah, that's the way I see it. I mean, I can't.
Okay.
Also, you want to make sure that the personalities are the right fit, right? And the expectations are realistic.
That's a very important thing, obviously. I mean, if that is, if there's you know, different types of personality conflicts, it's already a bad start, right?
Right.
So you that if you can't, you should be able to recognize that fairly quickly.
Yes.
And I think both parties should walk away at that time.
I would say that's the greatest criticism, when you know who you're not supposed to work with.
Well, it's just because, but it's exactly, it's like I will, you know, someone else can understand that type of personality or that group better than I can, because of their life experience. Others, and vice versa. So it's really, these things are just natural things.
And that's the beauty that comes with age and experience, right?
Sure enough.
You know.
Alfredo, we have time for one more question. Yes? I think Mary had a second one. Okay.
We just had that one.
How are you adapting with the supply chain constraints in the marketplace? And have you had to adapt or modify design elements accordingly?
That's a very, I'm trying to think, because one particular project we're constantly talking that, and we're constantly battling the escalation, or, you know, we're chasing it. And every time we don't change the project,
Yeah.
but every time we get costs come in, the costs go up, and we have to reduce, and it's like this constant chasing it. So we're definitely chasing it, and hopefully that will settle down. Seems like it might be settling down. So at least we can get some sort of stability in the market in that regard. And this is really not so much, again, material costs, it's all labor. It's putting the work in place cost. With regards to material, you know, I don't have less that of a problem with that, generally speaking. I think there are some things, for instance, in a theater project, seating, you know, long lead item, most of the best sort of, even if it's like a a type of seating that is retractable, for instance, in a flexible space. You know, the best products are generally out of the country. And so it's like, you're when are we gonna have that, you know?
Available 2024.
We have this, but we have problems with DWP and Southern, Edison, you know, getting transformers. I mean, getting, or electrical suppliers and getting motor control centers and so forth. And this is like, I can't modify, I mean, I gotta get power to the building. So it's like, I can live without, you know, stone countertops in Italy. I gotta get power to the building. So those are the things that are really driving, those are the things that are really driving some of those issues, you know, hey, if someone says, we wanted this stone and we can't get it, then we'll just get another stone. But it's not that big of a deal. There's so many.
Right.
You know? There's only 1-2 places to get power. You know, any property is one place. So
local is as big an issue as just waiting on things from.
Exactly.
You know, hopefully, you know, prices will come down. I mean, has anyone noticed what the price of a television is today?
It's come down.
There's so much of them that the supply is too much. Christia, you know, we just want to thank you again. I mean, for the takeaways that, you know, that we've taken from just understanding, you know, your process, your philosophy.
Your insight, design philosophy. It's been really enjoyable. We really thank you for this time, and it's been great.
It's been an hour already, for like 10 minutes.
Yeah.
It's just been an hour. I know, it's incredible. You know,
It's really
getting in the moment, and,
Yeah.
you know, but we really enjoyed our discussion today, especially your insights about, you know, the real estate development world, and, you know, we appreciate the impact that you are making in the work that you are doing. For today's participants, thank you so much for joining us. Please continue to stay tuned to our New Homes Division newsletters and for updates and events in the near future.
And we look forward to seeing you real soon.
Yeah.
And thank you again, Zoltan.
Yeah, thank you, Zoltan. Thank you to the whole team that put this together today. Ultimately, we're really pleased to be able to be out here with you today. We're going to say goodbye until next time.